everyone, thank you for being here. Welcome to my presentation about ABC data and the functions of behavior. I'm Sydney and I'm going to be giving you guys this training today. So we're going to first start with our agenda, and we're going to start off with introductions, then we're going to go into like what ABA is and behavior, and then we're going to go into ABC data. We're going to talk about what it is, we're going to model it, or I'm going to model it, and then we'll practice it a little bit together. And then you'll practice it on your own. We're going to talk about why it's important, and then we're going to talk about functions of behavior. We're also going to practice that, and we're going to talk about how that plays into ABC data a little bit. All right, so for the introductions, you're going to talk about your name, your occupation. You can do a good or a bad habit. If you'd like to do both, that's all right as well. And then if you would prefer a Reese's or a glow stick. So I'll go first. My name is Sydney Lewis Ferdinand. I am currently a behavior technician at Inspire Autism. I'm also getting my master's in applied behavior analysis, and I am going towards being a board certified behavior analyst. I prefer a Reese's. So yeah, we're gonna sit here.
I'm Shelly. I am a teacher. I have a bad habit of interrupting people, and I don't care.
Perfect. Thank you for participating, Shelly. All right, next.
I am Devin. I am a information security administrator. A bad habit I have is I procrastinate on work that I don't like to do, and I would prefer glow stick.
Perfect. Thank you, Devin.
I am Danielle. I'm an enrollment technician. A bad habit I have is nail biting, and I prefer Reese's.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Beautiful, guys. All right, so we're going to talk about ABA and behavior. So there is a technical definition on the screen, but in summary, it says that ABA is essentially the process of understanding behavior, and then how we can also change that behavior, what we can use to change that behavior, and understanding behavior a little bit more. If ABA is the study of behavior, then what is that, right? So in ABA, behavior is something that you can measure. It's something that is observable, something that you can see. So it's also influenced by changes in the behavior, or changes in the environment. So something in the environment controls the behavior, and then there is something after that in the environment that maintains the behavior. Another term I want to talk about is reinforcement. In ABA, it's something that will increase the likelihood of that behavior happening again in the future. So this is what we typically like to do. It's like when a kid does a good job, we're going to give them a cookie. They like a cookie. They're more likely to do that behavior in the future. Another term we're going to talk about just a little bit is punishment, and that's something that will decrease the likelihood of that behavior happening in the future. Something we typically think about is like yelling at someone as like a punishment, or something that was used a lot was like spanking. Spanking is a punishment, so that's going to decrease the behavior from happening, so will yelling. All right, so what is ABC data? It's a form of descriptive behavior data that allows someone, particularly a BCBA, or someone who is qualified to analyze that data, to make predictions about the behavior. It is in the narrative form, so it's written out in words. It's also a 3-term contingency. Now that sounds a little bit wordy, but it is, there's 3 parts that make up that behavior chain. There is the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence, which stands for the A, B, and C. Those are the 3 parts. I also like to think about it as like beginning, middle, and end, with the middle being behavior. So what happens on either side of the behavior. All right, so before we go into that a little bit, I am gonna have you guys watch this short little video, and then we can kind of break that up a little bit.
All right, buddy, we're done with the computer now.
I don't want to get off. I just got on.
Okay, you get 5 more minutes, okay? 5 more, okay?
Alright, cool. So now,
Alright, buddy, we're on.
oh, sorry. We're gonna talk about the antecedent, which is that first part of that 3-term contingency or that like behavior chain. So an antecedent is a change in the environment that happens before the behavior. So what does that look like? What is happening before the actual behavior occurs? So in this case, this would be the antecedent.
Alright, buddy, we're all done with the computer now.
So the antecedent is him saying, all right, we're all done with the computer. Does that make sense so far? Cool. All right, the behavior is, like we talked about, something that the participant is engaging in that's observable, something that we can see, that happens immediately after the antecedent or that beginning stimulus. So what does the behavior look like?
Okay,
So that behavior is the kid yelling and throwing the book. We good on that? Beautiful. Can I get a thumbs up? Love it. Alright, and the consequence is what happens immediately following the behavior. So it's a change in the environment, similar to the antecedent. And basically we're doing the same thing. We're just analyzing what happened immediately after. So the consequence is also what increases or decreases that behavior. So reinforces or punishes, like we talked about earlier. Sorry, guys.
you get 5 more minutes, okay? 5 more, okay?
So after the behavior of him yelling and throwing the book, he said, okay, you get 5 more minutes. So that's reinforcing him screaming and yelling. Cool?
Makes sense.
Beautiful. Thank you. Alright, so we're going to go over an example, and I'm going to ask for some participation here. We're going to analyze the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So we're just going to understand what the antecedent is first. So Johnny walks into the kitchen while his mom is talking to her friend. Johnny falls on the ground and begins crying. Tears are streaming down his face. And his mother runs over to him to provide comfort. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the antecedent. So I'm going to ask a volunteer to pick out the antecedent. Devin, go for it.
Is it Johnny falling to the ground?
The antecedent is what happens before the behavior. So you picked out the behavior, which is fantastic. But before would be Johnny walks into the kitchen while his mom is talking to her friend.
So it'd be him walking into the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So is the
Alright.
behavior about him walking into the kitchen, or does he not like her talking to her friend?
Can you repeat that?
Is the behavior because just walking into the kitchen, or is he mad about his mom's talking to a friend and not him?
Well, that's good. We're actually going to talk about like why the behavior happens later. But the behavior is Johnny falling to the ground, and then the antecedent is him walking into the kitchen while she's talking to another friend. So that was actually a really good question. So fantastic. But something we're going to talk about after this slide is whether it's observable and whether we can observe him a want or a need, or if it's a what is telling us what that want and need is, something that we can see.
Got it.
Does that make a little bit more sense?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for participating, and thank you for participating. Beautiful. Okay, so we already identified the behavior. So the behavior is Johnny walking, or the antecedent is Johnny walking in, seeing his mom talking to another person. The behavior is him falling to the ground and crying, and the consequence would be
Mother running over to comfort him.
beautiful. That was great. Great job. All right. There we go. So antecedent laid out, color coded.
Oh, that helps a lot.
Thank you. The antecedent is Johnny walks in, seeing his mom talk to another friend. The behavior is him falling to the floor and crying, and the consequence is his mother runs over to comfort him. Beautiful, guys. Great. Do we have any questions about this one? I know we already asked a little bit, but keep them coming. All right, some important considerations that we were talking about that Shelly kind of already addressed a little bit earlier is ABC data needs to be observable. Some of the key words that are not necessarily observable are wants, needs, likes. So how do we know that someone wants something? What do they do?
They'll start asking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great job. Glow stick.
But what if they're nonverbal?
If they're nonverbal, they can give nonverbal cues that they want something. So if I want your coffee cup, I'm gonna walk over to it. So the observable behavior is approach his coffee cup. Does that make more sense?
Like
Yeah.
pointing or
Yeah, pointing or like making eye contact with, or those are all great examples. So thank you, Shelly and Danielle. Great job. All right, are we good on observable? Beautiful. ABC data needs to be accurate. With accuracy comes details. Without details, we can't necessarily analyze the data properly. So another thing too is like tantrums. Tantrum describes a lot of different behaviors. So like being accurate would be like, were they hitting their head? Were they falling to the ground? Were they crying? Were they screaming? You know, how many times did they hit their head in a row before someone intervened and things like that. So making sure that that data that's being recorded is accurate. Questions on that? Beautiful. Okay. And this one does get a little bit complicated, but one situation can have multiple lines of ABC data. And we'll go over this one and I'll show you guys an example of this one in a second. But the consequence can also serve for the antecedent in the next row. And we'll see the data sheet in just 1 second. But if I get spanked and then start to cry, so spanking was the consequence, but then spanking was also the antecedent for me crying. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Little
Yeah.
bit.
We'll get into it in a second. It's gonna be a little harder right now, but once we see it, it'll be a little bit more easier. Are we good to move on? Okay. All right, so we got a couple things. These are two different scenarios. We'll go over the one on the left first, and then we'll go over the one on the right. This is going off of the considerations that we just talked about. We're gonna kind of pinpoint some things that need to be improved on this data. So the antecedent is Johnny wanted to play with cars. The behavior is he's hitting his head with a closed fist 5 times, and then his mother blocked him from hitting his head further. Does anyone have an idea of what might be wrong with this one? Yes,
The-
Danielle.
her antecedent where it said he wanted to play with the cars instead of describing what indicated what want would be. Like he pointed at the cars or he tried to grab a car to play with.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. That was beautiful.
I'm gonna go out on a limb. So his mother blocked him from hitting his head further.
Mhm.
That doesn't stop the behavior. He's still probably doing the action, but his mother's just preventing from damage, I would guess.
Yeah, so that's a good assumption. But so glow stick, here we go. Thank you for participating. That's a really good assumption. We don't want to necessarily assume that he's still doing it just based off of the data. He might have still been doing it, but this consequence, she's adding something in after the behavior occurs. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So after that behavior starts occurring 5 times before there was a consequence. Are we good on that?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Sure, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'll get more later.
Yeah, once we practice it, it'll come a little bit easier. But no, you picked out the right antecedent, what we can kind of like improve in this statement. So that was a good question though, Shelley, great job. Alright, so now onto the right side. I'll give you guys a second to read this and then I'll ask for a volunteer to pick out one thing that can be improved. Yes, Devin.
Can I say that behavior seems a little too vague? It doesn't specify what happened during the tantrum. It just said he engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. That's honestly exactly what I would improve. Oh, sorry. In this situation as well. So, how could we improve this statement?
You might specify some of the things he did during the tantrum. Like in the previous example, it said that Johnny hit his head with a closed fist 5 times. You might state that in the behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly what it looks like, right? Like we talked about before, tantrum includes a wide range of behavior. So describing exactly what you see. Perfect. Thank you, Devin. Alright, so this is typically how we would set this up, and I do have these data sheets for you guys. So we are gonna get into the practice a little bit. So there's one for you. There is an example on the data sheet as well as a definition of antecedent, behavior, and consequence. And then you can choose from pens or pencils. Alright, so this data sheet, as we can see, the antecedent is the second column, the date and setting. Typically, there are data sheets that are used over multiple days and multiple sessions, so it's important to identify where the behavior happened and on what date it happened, so you can analyze the data further. See if it's happening like several times a day or just once a day, and if it's only happening in one place. Antecedent, that's where the beginning of the behavior happens. Not the beginning of the behavior, but what comes before the behavior. Behavior is right in the middle, and then consequence is at the end. So if you guys need a little, yes.
Can we consider the I can't say antiquated
Antecedent?
antecedent? Can we consider that to be more of like a trigger?
Yeah, I would say like a trigger is a good word for it. Just like in terms of like what caused the behavior to start.
It's kind of like a snowball.
Yeah, if that's how you'd like to think about it, like, and that helps you, absolutely, absolutely. Good question. Have a glow stick. Beautiful. Sorry, I'm not good at throwing those glow sticks.
Is this a standard chart, or is this one you created, or is it something that we can get if we need it later?
That's a really good question. Typically, this is one I created, just for training purposes, but most of these charts will look similar. Sometimes there are charts that have you like circle certain antecedents or circle like certain consequences based on like the child they're analyzing. But in terms of like descriptive data, this is like the most common. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you for asking. Sorry, Shelley. Alright, so I'm gonna model this one for you guys, and then I'm gonna have you guys practice. So you don't have to write anything down now. Just know that when I wrote it out on the next slide that it would go into these boxes. Alright, so I do really quick want to reference that earlier I stated there could be multiple lines of ABC data in one session of like a behavior happening. Okay. I also do want to mention the fact that the consequence and the antecedent for the next chain is also stated here. So that's kind of how that would look. It happens pretty quickly, when the consequence is also the antecedent. So you would just have to write those down relatively quickly and collect that data as soon as the behavior happens. Cool. Do you guys have any questions about the model at all? Okay, cool. Do you guys want to watch the video again? Do we need any extra practice there? Now you guys are ready?
It was helpful that you pointed out again, though, that the consequence and the antecedent for the second behavior were the same thing.
Yeah,
Good, I'm glad, yeah.
I wouldn't have picked up on that.
Perfect, guys. You know what, Danielle? Have a receipt.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Getting quite a stash of
Okay, so right now you guys don't have to fill out like the date and the setting, but in the future you would if you were like with a child on your own. But for practice sake, we'll just skip that column. So I am going to play the video, and it's relatively short. So if you need me to play again, just let me know.
Alright, buddy, we're all done with computer now. Time's up. Time's up.
All right, so we are going to be writing ABC data on that video. If you guys need to see it again, just let me know. Shelly, I see you thinking a little bit. Would you like to see it again?
Sure.
Alright, buddy, we're all done with computer now. Time's up. Time's up.
Should we have multiple lines?
It's up to you.
That's a good question. I didn't even think of that. Feel a little lacking here.
Don't worry, Shelly. We'll go over it in a little bit, and we can
Thanks.
kind of clarify some things.
It helps you feel better if you're writing slow.
He's taking his time. Nothing wrong with that.
Can I see one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alright, buddy, we're all done with computer now. Time's up. Time's up.
I missed something.
Alright, you guys good?
Mhm.
Alright, who would like to go first and read theirs?
I think Devin should go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay,
Can you play it again just so I can kind of walk through
absolutely.
my thought?
Do you want me to pause it at any points?
Can you pause it before he gets up?
Before he gets up? Yes. I can do my best there.
Alright, buddy, we're all done with computer now. Time's up. Time's up.
Okay, so I said that this was kind of the first layer of it.
Mm-hmm.
I said there was two parts to it. For this, I said that the boy is told it's time to get off the computer for the antecedent,
Antecedent, yeah.
and then his behavior behavior is he reacts by saying he doesn't want to get off, and then the consequence is he's reminded that he has to get off the computer, and then that rolls into another antecedent,
There you go.
and from there he's reminded again to get off the computer, which to me is another trigger, and then his behavior that time is he actually gets up and gets away from the computer. And the consequence for that is he's moving on. I wasn't really sure with this one, but I said he moves on to his next activity with the adult.
Wow, that was very good. Yeah, so thank you for participating with that one. So, the antecedent you said was
The first antecedent was the boy's told it's time to get off the computer.
yes, and the behavior there.
He reacts by saying he doesn't want to get off the computer.
Yeah, so that is actually very good because he reacts by yelling and saying, "I don't want to get off," right? You're not saying like he doesn't want to get off. You're saying exactly what he said.
Mm-hmm. His exact reaction to the trigger.
That's something that's observable, because if he says "I don't want to" versus assuming that he doesn't want to, those are very different things. So very good job with that. That's not something that I described. So great job picking up on that. And then the consequence was
he's reminded again that he needs to get off the computer.
yeah. So that first chain, awesome. You did a great job with that. So let's go into the antecedent for the next chain. What was the antecedent there?
So the consequence of the first chain is also the antecedent of the next one.
Beautiful.
He's reminded that he needs to get off the computer, which to me is another trigger.
Mm-hmm.
That rolls into his behavior, which is he gets up and walks away from the computer. You can argue, like there's semantics to it, you can argue that he was a little upset about getting off the computer, but his action was getting up from the computer and walking away.
Absolutely. And then the consequence for that one?
He moves on to his next activity with the adult, because the adult kind of escorts him,
Yeah,
as opposed
beautiful.
to just letting him go to the next thing.
That was great. Great job. All right.
So mine was pretty much exactly the same as Devin's.
Okay.
I said that the antecedent was that he was being told it was time to transition away from the computer. His behavior was that he shouted, "I don't want to get off." The consequence to that was that the adult continued to transition him away from the computer time, which was the antecedent. But I did go with that the behavior was that he slammed the keyboard and mouse on his way away from the computer. But the consequence to that was that he still the transition still continued away from computer time.
Yeah, that was great. Right? We got the same result with just different wording, right? So that kind of shows you that like we can get the same thing, but and when you're analyzing that data, like when a BCBA is analyzing that data, it might be interpreted a little bit differently, right? And that is one of the downfalls of ABC data collection, is that everyone observes a behavior a little bit differently. That's why we have to keep it as objective as possible. So great job, Danielle. Beautiful. Shelly, you ready?
So I did a one-liner.
Okay.
And I said he was asked to get off the computer.
Mm-hmm.
He yelled, "I don't want to get off." The adult, for the consequence, reached over, and I didn't notice this until we watched it like 14 times,
Mm-hmm.
that he reached over and he actually turned off the monitor.
Oh,
So he turned off the
yeah.
monitor as
Oh,
a
did he?
consequence. Yes, he did. He turned off the monitor as a consequence. Kind of looked to me like he was like, "Okay, nope, this is it." Turned off the monitor and then gently pushed his shoulder and moved him away from the workstation.
Yeah, so I actually love how observant you were about that. Thank you. I'm going to give you a Reese's this time because there is no preference there. But I actually love how you analyzed that. The one thing that we might want to cue into, even after he turned off the mic, there was another behavior after that, which was him saying, or turned off the monitor, there was another behavior after that of him saying, like, "I don't want to," or, like, whatever he said, and then the consequence is that he did transition after that, once the technician continued with the demand. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Sure.
But honestly, like, I love how observant you are, so after we did all of that, we're going to watch it one more time.
I was just gonna ask if we could watch it again, so that because I totally missed that.
I didn't catch that at all.
He turned it off.
And then we'll talk about it a little bit more. Oops, sorry.
Alright, buddy, we're all done with computer now. Time's up.
get off.
Time's up.
Yeah?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, perfect. The other thing about this is that when this happens live, you can't replay a behavior.
I was just about
So
to say,
that's
it's
where
hard
we
to
get
track even though it's a video.
That's where we get some of the inconsistencies with ABC data collection. So being able to just say what happened immediately is something that comes with practice, but something that we kind of have to work on a little bit.
So, kind of an off-topic question, just because I'm like curious, like if you have someone in a room and like, let's say that the kid is having a tantrum across the room, and as the ABA, your job is to observe that.
Mhm.
If you're like relatively new, obviously like the fight or flight's gonna kick in and stuff like that. Your memory's gonna be skewed. Is it like, is there some kind of like training or I don't know, something to calm a person down so that they can get the correct recollection of the events that happened, so that it's not like, I think that he jumped across the table, or I think that stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, training comes with the job. So you do like a little, like it depends on the like clinic that you're at. But my clinic specifically, we do like a 40-hour training before, and then you do another week of training with a kid and a technician, so you're not
Okay.
on your own.
So you
So
can
you can
get
kinda,
like
like-
double
Yeah, so you can
observation.
kind of see and see the behaviors, understand them, and that's when you would be like practicing your ABC data collection. And then that's when you go one-on-one with the client.
Okay.
So, but obviously it does kind of like depend on the center. Some centers don't necessarily do that, and some centers do a little bit more. So it's just center based.
Yeah, experience and
Yeah, thank you. That was a good question. Glow stick.
I'm stacking them up over here.
Stacking them up.
Alright, buddy.
Alright, so why is it important? So essentially this just helps us understand the behavior a little bit more. What affects the behavior, what triggers the behavior, and then also what reinforces or punishes the behavior. So what reinforces a behavior tells us what's maintaining that behavior, what's keeping that behavior going and increasing its likelihood, or even decreasing its likelihood. When we have interventions, we want to increase a behavior. So if a behavior isn't happening, we want to figure out why is that behavior not happening. Cool? Beautiful. All right, and this leads us into the functions of behavior, so those maintaining circumstances. So the purpose or reason for engaging a behavior is the function, and every function or every behavior serves a function. So there are 4 functions, which the mnemonic to remember it is EATS, and that's escape, attention, tangible, and then sensory. So sensory is also known as automatic. The behavior is like the behavior or like the feeling of the behavior is reinforcing. Danielle, you kind of talked about like nail biting earlier. That would be an example of like a sensory behavior. Have you guys heard of like cricket feet? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where you like rub your feet together, kind of like when you're like laying in bed or like just like relaxing or something. I do that. That's my sensory behavior.
Wow, you just brought something to light.
And then like scratching a mosquito bite is also a sensory behavior. If you have an itch, you're gonna scratch it. You know, you get some sort of sense of relief there. That would be the maintaining factor, is that like feeling that you're putting out. So what other sensory behaviors do you have? If you don't have one, you can just like shout one out. Or if you can't think of one, give me just examples.
I mean, I like the tags on shirts, like the soft tags.
Yeah. Cool.
It's a comforting feeling.
Yeah,
Playing with your hair, like doing this.
that's a good one. Shelly, you got one?
No, I don't have anything right now.
So leg
I just
fidgeting.
looked down and I was like tapping my foot.
So the feeling of tapping your foot. Nice. All right. Cool, guys. Attention. So this is engaging in a behavior to gain the attention of another person. There's both positive and negative types of behavior, right? So saying like, wow, that's a cool shirt, or like, wow, you did a great job, like, putting your coffee cup down. Like, that's an example of positive. Or negative, we would be like, hey, stop shaking your leg, or like, hey, sit up straight. Those are examples of like negative ones. Or like, hey, Maisie, stand up. You know, like that might be a positive or negative depending on like if she's not supposed to be laying down, things like that. So examples of how to determine if attention is the function. So eye contact. You know, if you're saying like, hey, don't do that, and they like turn around and they're like looking at you, that's, you know, they're looking for that attention. Verbal comments, like sometimes I have kids that'll like do something and they go, hey, don't do that, because they're looking for you to say like, hey, don't do that.
Yeah.
And also like physical contact too, like if they come up to you and they're like grabbing you, or like a lot of kids like do these behaviors in conjunction because they're looking to gain attention in any way they can. So the last two are escape and tangible. Escape is engaging in a behavior to remove or avoid something in the environment, avoiding homework. You know, I don't want to do homework, so I'm gonna avoid that, which is procrastination. And then tangible, engaging in a behavior to gain access to something in the environment. Crying and flopping to the ground to get a cookie. Or, you know, like, if I wanted something over there, walking over there would be my behavior, saying it's the antecedent, and the consequence is that I obtain that tangible. Okay?
You don't think of it as that simple though.
No, you don't. You don't think of it as that simple. Or we think of it as too simple. You know, like it's simple
It
behaviors.
doesn't make sense because it's too simple.
Yeah, like simple behaviors. Often we don't think of them in three-term contingencies. Yeah. All right.
I love her.
I know, I do too. She's cute, right? All right, so we will. We're gonna watch this video and we're gonna kind of like powwow a little bit just to determine the function.
Love her.
To me,
Anyone have any ideas?
to me, the function here seems like eye contact because she keeps looking at her parent.
Eye contact is like part of the behavior, so what would the function be?
Attention seeking.
Yeah, because she's
Yeah.
seeing that they're like laughing and joking, and they think it's funny.
And mom's reinforcing that by giving it to her.
Hey, great job using the word reinforcing. Great job participating. Great job participating. Yeah, good job, guys.
This time. This is.
You need to crack the rest of it.
Love the purple.
I'm glad you like the purple ones. Maybe I'll be able to find those. All right, so then we're gonna watch this one, which might be a different one from the beginning. So let's make sure we're like paying extra attention to it, just because there are multiple videos with this kid and the technician.
All right, buddy, we're all done with the computer now.
I want to get off. I just got on.
Okay, you get 5 more minutes, okay? 5 more, okay?
What about this one? What do we think?
I think I'm gonna steal Shelly's word and say his behavior got reinforced because after he yelled and threw, he got rewarded with 5 more minutes.
Yeah, so what would the behavior tell you about the function?
Tangible.
It could be.
To me, it doesn't seem like attention because he doesn't really want the attention
Mm-hmm.
on him while he's playing his game. So it would be the second option. I forgot what it was. It was like it started with E.
Escape.
Yeah.
Thank you for participating. Shelly, thank you for participating. Danielle. All right. So, Shelly brought up a good one that I didn't even necessarily think about, was tangible. So the tangible item would be what?
Computer.
Yeah, the computer. But something that I didn't mention earlier is that something can serve multiple functions. So you can have any of those four, like double up, triple up, maybe even all of them at the same time. You know, like they can serve multiple functions.
Like a
And
computer,
escape-
nothing like shaking you and looking you in the eyes. That's physical and eye contact.
Mm-hmm. Well, that would be the same form of like attention.
Mhm.
Those behaviors are under attention. But great job defining those. But escape is another one because he might be escaping from whatever task that person is asking him to do.
Maybe he's got to go do homework.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Great job. All right, so we're gonna do a little summary. So, just to kind of like sum this up a little bit, ABC data helps us understand the behavior and its functions. Those functions maintain the behavior. And determining the function helps us determine an intervention. So if we know a kid is trying to escape from a task, we can maybe adjust that task, or we're able to like adjust the demand that we're giving him, saying like, oh, okay, like we can do a little bit of like tolerance training too. Like we can, like, if the demand is what he doesn't like, then we can adjust that demand, or we can say like, oh, you can say no thank you, and do some like communication training and things like that to help us adjust. Every behavior also is driven by a function. So every single behavior has a function behind it. So that's super important too. There's nothing that doesn't have a function. And then behavior is all around us. So because behavior is all around us, understanding those 3-term contingencies and why behavior happens is super important. We got a little quiz, guys. Okay.
Oh man.
What is antecedent?
It's, in my own words, it's kind of the trigger to the behavior. in,
Yeah.
The ABC.
When does it happen?
At the beginning.
Yes, beautiful. What is the behavior?
The action, the thing that happens
Mm-hmm. When does that happen?
in the middle.
Yes, beautiful. Oh, you want to
Well, I would
recess?
have taken the one stick too.
All right.
So I'm stuck with consequence.
Not necessarily.
That's the positive or negative that happens as the result of the behavior.
So
And the antecedent.
yes, beautiful. Glow stick.
I like
Describe
when you say
positive and negative in different terms. I'm challenging you a little bit here.
I don't want to be challenged. Let me think. Positive. I do like reward or I don't know.
Reinforcement
Oh, there
that'll
you go.
increase our behavior, or punishment that will decrease our behavior. But those are the technical terms. But you described it. Other than that, you described it perfectly. So great job. Did I already give you your glow stick?
You did.
I like thinking of it in both
Although it
terms
wasn't
too,
purple.
because consequence also sounds like such a negative term
Yeah.
all the time.
Absolutely.
That it's good to kind of hear that reinforcement is a consequence too.
Yeah. You know what? Thank you, Daniel. That was great input. All right. What is, we kind of talked about this already, but what is a term that is likely to increase a behavior? The terminology.
Reinforcing.
Yes. Beautiful. You're racking up the glow sticks over there, man. You too with the
We
Reese.
have a party later.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll skip mine.
You don't want the Reese. Do you want a glow stick instead?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, that was a little off to the side. Alright, what is decreasing behavior?
You said it.
What?
What's the term that we use when we are decreasing behavior?
Punishment?
Yes. Beautiful. Shelly, have a Reese's.
Maybe I should give it to Devin.
Alright, this one is a little bit trickier, and I hadn't necessarily talked about this, but what was the 3-term contingency that I was using to increase participation?
You were providing us reinforcement with candy or glow sticks.
Great, now let's talk about it.
Wait, are we gonna get a punishment?
I totally didn't even realize that I just skipped past these, but the antecedent's on the screen. So the antecedent would be me asking a question. The behavior would be me receiving participation from one of you, and then the consequence would be me
Receiving.
giving you a prize, whether that would be a glow stick or candy. Alright, so there are my references. Thank you guys so much for coming and participating. You guys are
Nice
just
job.
fantastic. Okay.
Maisie's very proud of you.
Oh, big stretch.